And boom, ladies and gentlemen, pleasure to welcome to the podcast Arvak Marshall, goalie coach, longtime coach, but also working very closely with the goalies. Arvak, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was just talking. I interviewed Elise Fennell, and she was like, "I've been working with Arvak Marshall," and I was like, "Wow, that's such a unique name." And then she spoke so many kind things about you. I'm like, I got to get him on the podcast to interview him about lacrosse goalie. So here we are.
It's exciting.
um, tell me about the first time you jumped in and played goal, learning to play goalie. If you could, I'd love to hear that story.
So for me, I was started playing lacrosse pretty late, I guess nowadays, and not until seventh grade. And I was an attackman. And so I played a little bit of goalie in high school, but I was pretty much an attackman. And then once I got out of high school, I started coaching guys and they needed somebody to shoot on. And so I just jumped in the cage and let them shoot on me while I was coaching. And so I coached guys for a while and just love goalies. So that's pretty much how it started. And then just love lacrosse all around and
That's pretty
kind of took
courageous
over
of you to,
towards it.
yeah, it's pretty courageous of you to jump in there. Especially at such a late age. How did you figure out how to do it? Or had you had a little bit of coaching from your high school days?
Well, I like the word courageous. Sometimes people use a different word for goalies, right?
Yeah.
Not always courageous, crazy, psycho, mental, some of them normal, but no, I just didn't really have a fear of playing goalie. I had defensemen that would be hitting me with sticks and all the time. So you kind of get used to that little bit of pain. And
Yeah.
then ball, not that much different, even
Yeah.
though it is a little different. Um, so that's kind of where I learned, just learned by getting in there and doing. Didn't really have a ton of advice. So I just started seeking out all sorts of other sports and other ways to develop goalies.
Interesting. And what on that topic, what other sports did you find to be like most helpful to a lacrosse goalie?
Hockey goalies, baseball catchers, volleyball, as weird as that sounds. Um, Pretty much any sport, soccer, any type of goalies, and even other sports, you can always bring little bits and pieces into it.
Uh-huh.
Field hockey goalies are a little bit different in terms of how they are taught to stand. So it's kind of opposite of what lacrosse goalies are, but it's interesting to listen to what other sports goalie coaches are teaching them and see if you can apply or tweak or take the good parts from those other sports into being a goalie coach.
Yeah. I do that quite a bit too. My main ones were like tennis because I actually played tennis before I played lacrosse, and I have I feel like returning a serve is very much like making a save. And I also played infield in baseball, and so I think a lot of like that sort of prep step and that kind of getting ready to catch a line drive. You mentioned catchers, like I think infielders is very similar as well, but I agree. There's a lot of different sports where you can kind of take little things and apply them to goalie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about volleyball? I talk to me about that.
So volleyball, they have to, when you set a ball and they go to spike it, they are not just looking at the ball, they're scanning the whole field in terms of, or the whole court in terms of where they actually want to hit it. And
Yeah.
so when you can develop the ability to see a ball, see a cutter, see where you want to hit it, body awareness, field awareness, court awareness, all of those things apply to being a lacrosse goalie. Because if I just stare at the ball, I might see a cutter out of my peripheral that would affect maybe how I step, where I step. So you kind
Right.
of are developing field awareness, not
Right.
just being tunnel vision where you miss out on that. Obviously, when they shoot the ball, you have to be aware of that. But leading up to that point, you have to take in all your surroundings.
Yeah. So true. So true. Yeah. Um, I remember like a lot of times goalies will ask me, how do I be more, just how do I become more athletic? And the answer is kind of what we're talking about right now is just kind of play other sports. Cause when you're
Mm-hmm.
playing pickup basketball, for example, or soccer, there's just so much like going on around you. And that ability to like read a play, but then also be in control of your body, it helps you out tremendously as a goalie.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the
What?
one of the big things I good.
No, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say one of the big things I teach goalies or want to teach goalies is just that whole body awareness of how their bodies move in space. If they notice certain things that are happening when a shot's getting ready or when they're getting ready to shoot, or do you notice this? So I ask a lot of questions with goalies
Mm.
just in terms of what they notice about what they play rather than me just pointing it out. Because it's easy if I tell them what I see, but if they're not able to even feel what I see, then it doesn't do me much good because
Right.
I'm telling them what I see with their body and how it moves. But if they're not able to be aware of it, then how do they fix it? So kind of
Right.
body awareness is a really big thing that I teach a lot of goalies. And applies not just for lacrosse, but kind of a little bit of everywhere.
Yeah. On that, for example, one of the very common issues that very young goalies have is like, when you're set up in your stance, your first move is kind of like in, right? Like you get small, and it's a very like instinctual natural reaction. And to your point, like probably many goalies don't even realize they're doing it.
Right.
And so, you're saying to correct that, you first ask them, do you feel yourself doing that, right?
Oh yeah. So a lot of times goalies are not aware of a lot of the things they do. So some
Right.
goalies, they'll move their bottom hand. And I say, do you know that you move your bottom hand every time you go to make a save or when you go to make a save? And they go, no. And I said, do you notice that your shoulders go back, not just kind of huddled in like a turtle, but do you know that sometimes your shoulders will go back or your hips will tilt in, or that your base is wider all of the time, or it's narrow, or it moves 6 to 8 inches in your ready stance? I have no idea. And so when you ask them that, now they can at least be aware of it. You don't have to be perfect in how you set up, but if you're aware that, oh yeah, I felt that time my feet were really narrow on a shot to move. Your feet can be close together and heels can be touching each other and you can still make a save. But that's kind of your base starting point where this is my normal. My normal can vary a little bit, but if your normal varies a foot, well,
Right.
it's going to be a little bit harder for you to be consistent,
Right. Right.
in my opinion.
Yeah, totally. I agree. And then once they do recognize that bad habit, let's say, how do you coach them to get rid of it? Is it just a question of like high quality, purposeful reps and kind of building that muscle memory, or is there something else you like to do?
That one I think is a challenge for a lot of goalies. And maybe you found this as well, is if a goalie is working on something, they are not okay with the ball goes into the goal while they're learning that thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So they go, okay, we're working on keeping your bottom hand consistent. But if a goal gets scored on, they get frustrated and they want to make the next save. So then they just go back to what their normal is.
Exactly, exactly.
So
Yeah.
that purposeful practice of going, hey, we're getting better in this so that you are more consistent and better in the long run.
Right.
But it's very difficult for goalies to understand that because they want to make every save, which that's your job, is to make saves, right? And
Right.
so being able to separate the training part of games and reps after reps after reps, if I'm getting frustrated because what I'm working on is not getting fixed, then I just stop thinking about what I'm working on and I just want to make a save. And so it becomes that battle.
Right. I mean, you definitely got to set the expectation of like, hey, I want you to give up, 70% of the shots, or you're going to give up a lot of goals as we work through this. But in the long run, right, it's going to be a lot better,
Yeah.
which is hard, which is hard, right?
Well,
Especially if they're competitive.
I say I haven't yet met a goalie that I've worked with that goes doesn't get frustrated when a ball goes in.
Right.
And so you have to, again, remind them, as you said, in the long run, this is practice. This is us getting better at the little things. So they add up a little
Yeah.
bit better every practice. And I like percentages, I like math. And so if they go, hey, you are more consistent at this and you're at 70% of the time when I'm shooting on, you do this, but the other 30, you're doing this. Most goalies want to jump from 70 to 100. They don't realize that, hey, this practice you went from 70 to 72, or
Hmm.
next practice when you came back after you've worked on it for a week, you've gone up to 75 or 80. And so sometimes, depending on what we want to work on, if a goalie's doing something at 85%, they might go, I keep doing this. When you don't keep doing it, you did it 10% of the time in our practice today. So you're not keep doing it, you just do it, but you notice it more than the other. So a lot of times they notice what they want to work on more than the 90% of the time, 80% of the time that they did things really, really well. And so they get stuck on that 10% rather than realizing that, hey, yeah, the past month I've improved from 60 to 80. They didn't miss out on that. They still focus on the 20, which is the great part, but you still got to celebrate when you go from 60 to 80, which I don't know in your experience if goalies struggle with that part of appreciating the improvement that they make.
Of course, of course. I think it's so easy just in human nature to focus on the bad, right? There's this cartoon that I've shared on my Instagram where like the brain is like looking at all these good things over here and he's like talking to the heart and he goes, "Hey, heart, like check this out." And he's like, "Not now, like I'm focused." And he's got like a microphone, magnifying glass, like focused on this one little bad thing, right? That's just sort of human nature, and it can kind of bring you down as a goalie and kind of make you feel bad mentally when you don't realize like all of this great stuff that you're doing.
Right.
So I mean, that's kind of a life lesson, right?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you worked with a ton of goalies, in your career. When someone comes to you, say like, brand new, 10, 11 years old, just kind of getting into it, what are the first couple of lessons look like? What would you want to teach them right away?
So probably the first thing that I teach every goalie is how to juggle. So as weird as that sounds, that is to me the big part and just how I approach being a goalie in terms of if you learn to juggle, you can learn tricks. And so I can learn pretty good hand-eye coordination. And then when I teach them to juggle, I teach them to read while they juggle. And so then we have conversations at the start of our lessons. So they juggle and we just talk to each other about life, about what they did during the week, what the best part of the week was, how everything is going, what they want to learn, what they want to. And so that's kind of how it builds.
Okay.
But juggling to me is one of the best things that I teach goalies. And it builds from there. Some goalies who we juggle and they read upside down. Some of them read upside down on a balance board. So you can build that challenge into goalies and add tricks. But then from the standpoint of jumping in goal, I do a ton of stuff with tennis balls. I do a ton of stuff with little foam balls. We actually, for some of the younger goalies, just to get them wanting to jump in cage, we do dodgeball, but we do dodgeball where you actually have to catch it. So it's kind of the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have 2 or 3 people that are outside throwing balls at the goal and they don't have a stick. They just have a helmet and they have to stop everything that is thrown at them. And so they're not lacrosse balls. So they get excited of stopping anything that's thrown at them. And then I kind of mess with the rules. So if the goalie catches it, then they get to go attack the shooter. And so they get to catch a ball and then run and throw a ball at whoever is throwing the ball. So I usually throw out 20 or 30, just little tiny different balls. And if they catch a ball, then they get to have freedom to go throw a ball at the people who are shooting at them. So it kind of gets them excited about catching a ball, stopping a ball. And then once they have that success, then they get to be on the offense because a lot of times goalies are just stuck in a cage when people are shooting at them. So it kind of gets the goalies a little bit excited about playing goal and having a lot of fun. So we do that sometimes, but
love it.
Really it's just getting them used to not being afraid because that to me, I think is the biggest part of it.
I was going to ask you about that because you mentioned that, I was not afraid when you first jumped in, and that's like a very common thing. And those little Nerf balls you're talking about, the ones that kind of like, they're like indoor, like golf ball, like they float a little bit. Are those ones you're talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have baseball, softball, different colors, but they're a little bit smaller than a lacrosse ball. So you can use those with sticks, but we actually would do dodgeballs. So actually foam dodgeballs, we would do those too.
Oh, cool.
And
yeah.
So it was a variety of different things that we do with some of the smaller goalies, younger goalies, I say, not smaller, but younger goalies, just to get them in that mindset. Because a lot of times I think coaches, when they're just starting out, just put them in shooting drills when they're in 3rd grade or 4th grade or 5th grade. And I know you have to be a very special person to jump in shooting drills as a third grader or fourth grader when you're just learning how to play goalie. And they go, yeah, you want to play goalie? Here, just jump in the shooting drill. And I just think that's the worst thing that you can do to a young new goalie is put them in shooting drills with third and fourth graders who have no idea where they're shooting the ball.
Right. Right.
And then go, why are you so afraid of it?
Right. It reminds me. So I started playing goalie in college. Like I switched from midi to goalie in college because our team needed a goalie. And like our coach asked me if I wanted to try goalie, and I was like, yeah, I'll try it. And then he's like, all right, just go like stand in the goal, like no pads, just stand in the goal for this drill. No one's gonna shoot on you. And I'm like, okay. And then this one dude shoots on me, and I like whizzes by and hits the corner. And I was just like, what in the world did I just sign up for? That was insane. And then I got hit in the shin and like in a later like the actual getting warmed up. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I've never felt a pain like that. And like you have a bad experience like that as a kid, and you're like, I don't want to do this, right?
Yeah.
Oh man, I love it. Anyway, I love those foam balls because it really can kind of like they float a little bit, so it disassociates the stick movement with like something fast coming at you, and I just got to like be patient, right, and just kind of see that thing coming at me, and then make that save movement. So I use those quite a bit as well.
Mm-hmm.
So all right, cool. What about in like the college game nowadays? I know you work with Elise. Do you watch any other goalies? Are there any other goalies that you've really kind of admired, what they're doing, how they're playing? Maybe
I
other
just
goalies
love
you work with?
lacrosse. I just love lacrosse and I love watching all goalies just to see how unique everybody plays. And that's, I think, the part that every goalie has to realize is that you have to figure out what your style is
Mm-hmm.
in terms of everything. So you can watch 10 different games, and there's usually not two goalies that will play exactly the same. And so you have to figure out as a coach how somebody moves, how a lot of different aspects of that goalie. But in terms of goalies that I watch and admire, I watch guys' games, I watch the girls' games. It's different styles, and I won't say you have to teach differently, but a lot of the time and room stuff in guys is from 15 yards away, and girls are not that way.
Yeah.
Girls is much more inside, finishes way more than guys. So it's a little different in how they move, or how they set up, I should say, from being ready of guys where they have to be ready a lot earlier for 15-yard shots, 10-yard, 50-yard shots, time and room, step downs, where if a girl has a time room step down, they're not from 15 yards away. They're from
Right.
8 meters,
8 meters,
6 meters, right?
Right.
You're going, all right, we're just shrinking our time and room shots by half or a quarter,
Right.
which makes it so much more challenging. But no, there's a lot of great goalies out there that you have to appreciate how much more difficult I think the girls' game is now with the sticks and what girls can do with sticks.
Totally.
Where I would say back in the wooden stick days, wasn't involved in the girls' game back in the wooden stick days. I started in the girls' game when they didn't have out of bounds, and then that changed, which to me was quite amazing, just in terms of the rules and how far the women's game has come.
Yeah.
Or when I started coaching girls and they threw it out of bounds and they gave it back to the same team that threw it out of bounds, I was so confused. And they go, yeah, there is no out of bounds. So that doesn't
I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that. Wow. Okay. Yeah. What about so yeah, I totally agree. It's like much harder to be a goalie in the female game, and all the shots that you see are like right on top of you. Um, I interview a lot of female goalies and talk to them, and talk to Molly La Liberty like in the national championship game 2 years ago. She had like 3 saves, right? And like, 12 goals against. She's like, yeah, that's a great game. Like that's what my team needed from me, right? Is those
Right.
3 saves in that particular moment. And so yeah, it's much harder to be a female goalie stats wise. Do you like, I know it's like the types of shots that they see are very different, where the shots come from, very different, games are very different. But when it comes to like the fundamentals of like stance, save movement, like positioning. Do you teach the guys and the girls the same?
I do. I'm very big on bottom hand speed, which is, I don't know if that's a weird thing. I haven't heard anybody talk. I know a lot of times coaches talk about top hand speed.
Hmm.
And so the thing that I always ask goalies, or the question that I always ask goalies, is your top hand the only thing that makes the save? And they go, well, no. So your bottom hand's involved in every save that you make, right?
Yeah.
And so how often do we teach and train that part of it? So from that's kind of one of the areas that we talk about a lot with goalies in terms of both hands working together. And
Yeah.
again, I ask questions with them in terms of how far are your hands apart? Does it matter how far your hands are apart? Some of them are really close, some of them are far away. So I just ask them what feels best for you. And the interesting part, which I think a lot of goalies, as they think for the guys, maybe not as much for the girls that I've seen, some of them, but for the guys goalies that I work with, because they grow sometimes anywhere from a foot to 18 inches when I start with where they end up, is sometimes their hands are 6 inches apart, sometimes they're 12 inches apart. And then as they get older, they adjust. But I think a lot of goalies, in my experience, they keep their hands, or maybe they don't even think about how far their hands are. And they don't change or adjust if they get taller.
Mhm.
They just keep them where they are. And sometimes I'll ask goalies, why are your hands this way? And they go, well, this is just where they told me to put my hands. They told
Yeah.
me that they're supposed to be this far apart. So I said, well, have you ever moved your hands closer together just to see? Well, no, because they told me it's supposed to be here. Oh, okay. And so sometimes we'll tweak and adjust that. But a lot of it from the girls and guys game is just figuring out what works best for them.
Yeah.
Um, and then letting them experience in their own mind what they like versus just
Hmm.
having somebody tell them what to do.
I 100% agree. Yeah, I know. I've talked to a bunch of coaches and pretty prominent coaches that are like, your hands got to be like, one, your sort of your forearm length apart, and that's I'm very strict on that. And then, then you look at like, Will Mark play for Syracuse, right? And his hands are just like I'm like, what's going on with your hands, my man? Like, how do you have them so? He's like, dude, that feels so good for me, and like I can get to all the locations like that, and I just feel so athletic. And so it's like, if that works for you, right, and you're making the saves, then more power to you, right?
Right. And then the other part is the height of goalies, right? If you're a 5 foot or 4 foot 11 goalie, or you're a 6 foot 3 goalie, is that going to affect how you set up and cage?
Right.
Well, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Maybe my thumb, and I know back in the day it was, maybe sometimes people still do it, is it's always thumb eye, right? My top, it's always thumb eye, thumb eye, thumb eye. And so that's what I ask people, and they say, well, wait, thumb eye. I said, okay, well, why? Well, that's just, what do you mean why?
Yeah.
Why is it thumb eye? Well, so I can see it. And so then I take it back to juggling, where if I can juggle and I can read, then I know where my hands are. And so I don't have to see my hands because I know where they are. So I'm much more aware of making saves simply because I know where my hands are in space, and I don't have to see my thumb because I know where it is. And so I tell goalies it can be anywhere. You can make it your eye all the way to your below your chin. So it doesn't matter. So your hands can be tight or your hands can be further away. That's up to you to figure out. And so,
Yeah.
but a lot of goalies just want to be told what to do. No, I just want you to tell me what to do. I said, no, I'm not going to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
You gotta figure this out.
You got to figure it out. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I actually the more I've coached goalies, the more I think like, because I was taught that as well, the eye, thumb, ball, and kind of getting your hand right there. And I actually think that's a little too high now, personally, because it puts a little like tension on my shoulder when I have it right here. And like I think tension is the killer of goalies. Like if I have tension and then the shot comes, like I have to sort of release that tension and then go get it. And so like I was much, I then started playing and coaching, like, keep it more around chin level because it feels more comfortable for me. But again, if someone's having success with their butt facing the shot, right, and that's how you're making all the saves. But if you're not making the saves, you might want to turn around.
That's
So
the part where when they make saves, you go, hey, everything's working. What are we working on? What? Okay. And then somebody, when you ask a question of why are you doing this? And they go, this is just how I'm taught. And you
Right.
make little tiny tweaks, or you go, oh, have you ever thought about doing this? Have you ever thought about your feet being a little wider? Have you ever thought about this? What
Yeah, yeah,
happens if you
yeah.
do this? And then allowing them to explore how that how they make saves by doing the little tweaks. And I always tell goalies, I'm not going to tell you one way to do it. I'm just not going to do that. I let you figure it out. I can give my thoughts and advice, but I'm not you. I don't know how your body works. And as weird as it sounds, you might have very different, your movements might be better for you. And my body's not going to be able to move in that same way.
Mm.
You might
Right.
hold tension or have tighter muscles here, and that's why you move the way you move. I can't figure that out. I can watch and tell you what I see, but it's up to you to figure out how you best move in cage to go to goal. I can tell you
Totally.
the things that I notice of where you, as you said, I have that tension in my deltoid, right? I have my tension up here, so I feel that. But when it's here and I lower my hand an inch and a half, well, the tension goes away. If my bottom hand is straight out, now you feel the tension in your shoulder. Well, how about if you move your bottom hand so that's more to the middle of your belly button? Okay,
Right.
tension goes away.
Right.
Tension might be good for you. Tension's bad for me. I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to go back to that point you mentioned about the bottom hand being so
Mm-hmm.
crucial in the saves because I interviewed a goalie coach, Ted Bergman, and he this was a while back, and he like taught me that concept. And before that, I used to do like goalie drills, with like one hand behind the back and like I'll throw the ball and then you'll make the save, right? And then I was like, wait a minute, like that's dumb. Like because you're right, like like saves are not just one-handed. And so often, it's top hand straight to the ball. And yes, that is crucial. That is important, but that bottom hand is equally as important in getting the stick there, right? And assisting with that rotation. So two-handed saves always.
That's the interesting part if you think about it, right? Is if you make a stick side high save and my top hand speed is really fast, my bottom hand's going to have to do what? It's either going to have to let my top hand go get it, or my
Right.
bottom hand's going to have to join it to go get it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Those are the only two ways that it will happen. So either both hands are going to get it, or if I have top hand speed, it's going to slide through my stick. Or if I squeeze my bottom hand and my top hand goes, now I'm hindering the speed. And
Right.
so I appreciate that you said that putting your hand behind your back doing that drill is dumb, because I tell that to all the goalies that I work with. And I understand the concept is we want to drive our top hand. But if you even think about it beyond that, is if I put my top hand behind my back and I go to make a save, what does your body do? Your body rotates, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now you have tension in your top shoulder. So you're teaching your body to rotate when you make that save. And if I go to make the save offside high, I'm turning, versus if I have it here and I go, now I'm actually making my
Making
hands
square. Yeah.
faster. But I just to say, but you think about the same concept of going over, going under. So you can make a very simple tweak in just doing the ball toss drill is just keep both hands out in front of you. And when you go to do that, your bottom hand should mimic what the save is. So I
Exactly.
can still do the
Right.
same ball toss drill, but I just make that my top hand and my bottom hand work together. So now they both work together, which
Mm-hmm.
again, I always tell the goalies goes back to juggling and crossing midline and all those, a lot of different neurological concepts. So
I like it. I like it. Awesome. What about some other drills that you think are absolutely, important that you love to do with the goalies? Anything come to mind, or is it just kind of what they want to work on for that particular day?
I do a lot of vision stuff and balance stuff. Which ties into kind of just vision training with a lot of goalies. And my middle son, which is probably like 12 or 15 years ago, probably 12 years ago, he was having trouble reading, and we took him to a vision therapist, and he was talking about his eyes weren't converging together when I was not. And so it kind of got me down the road of looking into all vision, because we had to take him to get his eyes basically working back together again. And
Yeah.
then I started thinking about, well, how much do we actually train vision with goalies in terms of the muscles that we use in our eyes? How often does that train? Well, I don't know, not a lot, right? And
Right.
not a lot of goalies, but if you watch hockey goalies, Hockey goalies, their pregame is their eyes bouncing. So their eyes bouncing up, bouncing down, bouncing diagonal. So the muscles that we have in our eyes, one goes up, down, one goes left to right, one wraps around. And so we train those muscles in the same way that we would train going and lifting weights. And so that is the interesting part, just in terms of what my son taught me, was he had to do drills nonstop just to get his eyes to work together. And so I do a lot of vision training with goalies in terms of getting their eyes to bounce from left to right, track a ball. But all you're doing is just training your eyes, which is pretty unique in the standpoint of why wouldn't we do that?
Right,
Right?
right.
Just doing shots. Okay, well, if we can do other things to where we develop those eyes and the muscles in our eyes, we become better goalies.
That's so intriguing. So the exercises you do are just like kind of just basically just moving your eyes all about, moving them up, moving them down, moving them left, moving them right. And that
Yeah,
builds the muscles and allows me to focus on like pick up shots a little bit quicker.
there's a lot of different resources out there. One of them is I think it's called the Z Health.
Mm-hmm.
Is one of the ones that, I don't know if you're familiar with them. It's an interesting website. They talk about balance. It's a lot of neuroscience stuff and how our bodies and how we prime our nerves to be faster, better balance, better vision. So that's one of the resources, but it really is just developing our eyes, bouncing our eyes back and forth, bouncing them up and down, bouncing diagonally, doing that while we walk, doing it while we walk backwards,
Mm-hmm.
doing it with a stick, doing it with your finger. There's a lot of different resources out there in terms of, but I learned that from hockey goalies and again with my son and just the resources that we found.
Yeah. One of the ones that I heard is like, I think they're called like pencil push-ups, where like I'll put like a pen like here and then I'll like focus on the tip of the pen in the very close for distance, right? And then I'll pick up
Yep.
something in 10 feet back and focus on that, and then back to the pen and then back to that, right? So kind of training my eyes to pick up something real quick and then refocus on something in the background. And that kind of, to me, kind of mimics a shot or mimics lacrosse of like the ball moving so quickly. I don't know if you've done that one or heard about that.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. One of the other things that, if you think about it too, is everything we do pretty much in life is always left to right. We read always left to right. So we don't usually get a whole lot of practice of training our eyes to go diagonally. We don't really train our eyes to go low to high. It's not really
Interesting.
what we do. So
Right.
sometimes we'll have goalies just hold a book upside down, like a Cat in the Hat book or a Dr. Seuss book. But I have quotes that I bring and I just hang up on the fence or wherever we're doing our training, and I have them read upside down. And so they have to, in their brain, flip their brain to read right to left, which again, if I'm always tracking things left to right, it works really good for a righty shooter to shoot it my offside, right? But if they're a lefty
Yeah.
shooter, then I got to track something on my right side that goes to my left side. And so, how often do we really track that outside of just getting shots? Do we practice that anywhere else in life?
Right.
Um, so,
That's funny. I just had this vision of Arvak training the goalies of like the circus down there. They're like juggling and standing on their head and reading Dr. Seuss upside down. And
well, that's sometimes what people say when we're done training is, I feel like I'm a circus, I'm juggling, and I have some pretty good jugglers. And so couple of my goalies can juggle four. Some of them can do probably 20, 25, 30 tricks.
yeah.
So it gets really fun when they can do that and be able to change the tricks that they do and then have a conversation and juggle four and then partner juggle, which is not just the normal four ball juggling, but they actually can juggle six together with their partner, which is, it's pretty impressive when you get a duo of goalies or goalies that are on the same team, that you can help them.
Yeah.
And then it's really fun and challenging so that they both can practice. But yeah, it sometimes does look like circus.
I like that. If a young goalie's listening to this and wants to learn how to juggle, is there like a specific YouTube video that you always send people to, or just whatever, go there and find one?
Find one.
Yeah.
I'm teaching juggling for probably over 20 years. So usually what I tell goalies when they first start is you want to count out loud until you can get to 10 throws. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I count out loud, it forces my mouth and the voice to match the rhythm of my throw. that is the big thing. And a lot of times goalies don't want to talk out loud, whether they just don't want to talk or whether they don't want to have a voice. But anytime I teach goalies, I always tell them just count out loud just so that you can match a rhythm. And so
Mm,
the thing that applies from a shooter is I ask them what other things have a rhythm. Well, there's a rhythm of life, there's a rhythm of seasons. Usually when people are dodging, they have a rhythm in their cradle, they have a rhythm in their jog, they have a rhythm in their run. And so if I practice having that rhythm, it can calm me down also. So I
mm,
can go, okay, I'm focusing on the rhythm of my heart, the rhythm of my breathing. You can apply that concept of just rhythm and juggling to a lot of different areas, but really it's just about practicing with intention. So sometimes goalies go, I don't really want to practice. And sometimes parents make them practice and then they're not really actually listening or
right,
focusing on doing it because their parents are wanting them to do it.
right.
And so I tell everybody that you can pretty much learn to juggle in a week if you do it for 20 minutes a day. If
Mm-hmm,
you do 20 minutes a day, you can learn to juggle in a week
mm-hmm.
if you really want to. But that's really, again, only if you really want to.
Yep. You got to want it, right?
Yep.
You cannot set fire to a damp piece of wood.
Nope. I
Love it.
will tell an interesting thing, and this is just the one of the cool parts when I have them juggle is I always tell one of people that I work with that I'll give you 4 lessons, and if you can't juggle, I'm not going to work with you again.
Mm.
And so it's interesting once I tell them that I'm not going to work with them again, usually within a day or 2 days, I'll get a response from the parent that, yeah, they learned how to juggle.
Mm. Yeah.
So, yeah, once they want to do it, they'll do it.
Stakes are high. Stakes are high. What about if a goalie's going through a slump? Um, they're not seeing the ball well. They were playing at a certain level. They don't feel like they're playing up to that level. How would you help them get out of that?
Ask questions. As weird as that sounds, um, in terms of what do they think after they get scored on? If you get scored on the first shot, do you think that you're going to make the next save? How do your coaches interact with you? How does your defense interact with you? Who do you look at after you get scored on? Maybe it's in practice and you don't, but in games, I like to watch just interactions with goalies and their coaches. So where does the goalie look after they get scored on? Do they look to their coach to see what their coach's reaction is? Did they look to their parents to see what their parents say? What is their process after they get scored on?
Mhm.
Do they walk around the cage? Do they step out of the crease? What's going on in their head? It's not a simple thing. It's really a lot of questions that I ask in terms of how do you get reset after you get scored on, whether you're in a slump or you're not in a slump. Is it a slump that you notice that it's because it's an 8 meter? Is it first hash? Is it second hash? Do you think now that it's the first hash or second inside hash that, oh, great, this is the one that I'm struggling at. This is the one that I'm really working on. Now, great, now they got it. Or we're going, no, we can make the save. Made it before. Let's go.
Yeah.
So a lot of the words that, or a lot of the questions that I ask them is really just to figure out what's going on in their head and kind of go from there.
Yep. What where should we be looking, right? Not the coach, not at our parents, right? But what should my post goal routine look like if in your opinion?
Again, it's very specific to that goalie. Some goalies are very intro- introverted or introspective and they go, okay, I need to look inside. Some goalies, they need to walk around the crease to take a breath. Some people, they just forget about it and they're done.
Mm-hmm.
And I got scored on. Okay. And then they process it after the game. Some of them process it in game. But from the standpoint of figuring out what worked best for them, some people it is to tap the post 3 times. Some people it is to encourage somebody. So if I'm in a slump and I want to encourage somebody, it kind of takes the focus off of me and puts it on somebody else who did a really good job. Where I would say
Mm-hmm.
that if you mess up, you fess up, right? And so if I messed up, then I fess up. As a defender, when the huddle's done, you get, hey guys, that was on me. I'll get the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I get scored on, does the defense look at me like, oh, great? No, okay. Or if you have a backup goalie and you're competing, then how does that work? If I get scored on, then now I'm worried about is the next goalie going to come in? Am I going to get pulled? And so just from a post score, I say take a breath and get the next one.
Yep. Love it. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds simple, but it becomes a little bit complicated just in terms of every goalie being unique and how they process things.
Yeah. So ask question. So if someone's like they say they're struggling with a specific kind of shot, like, hey, I'm really struggling with my off stick low. I had it, right? I could make saves, but now I just for some reason can't do it. What kind of questions could we ask?
So I usually avoid the words struggling. And if a goalie says that, if they go, hey, I want to work on this, get better at this. But
Yeah, I
once they
like
go,
that.
I'm really struggling with this, now it's already in their head that they're struggling and it's a negative thing.
Right.
Where I like to go, hey, I really want to work on this. So even just reframing the
The
way that
language.
they talk,
Yep.
that to me is really big. There's certain words that I don't like goalies use because I consider them bad words. um, but just from the simplicity of we're working on this and I'm struggling with this, I go, okay, well, let's work on that.
Yeah.
What do you notice?
Yep.
I'm just not getting it. Okay, are you seeing it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it really well. Or am I late? Or is it off of feeds? Because a shot can be different based off of a feed or an 8 meter, right? If
Yep.
it's I'm really struggling with offside low, let's say, or I really need to practice getting better at offside low. Okay, well, is it on 8 meters? Is it on feeds from the wing? Is it on feeds from behind? Is it on drives down the alley? What's specific? And if I can ask them those questions, then they can go, man, it's really just on feeds. Okay, well, then we just
Yeah.
work on feeds. And then
Right.
now we got to work on positioning, right?
Yep.
And so now maybe your positioning's a little bit off. And that's the reason that you're not getting that save. But on drives, you're great. On drives, you're perfect position. But on a feed, for whatever reason, maybe you're set up too far to the left. And that's why you're giving up that whole side. Okay, well, now I'm just adjust your positioning and it has nothing to do with your hand speed. It has nothing to do with you not making it. It's just that all right, you're just out of position a little bit. And that's all we got to adjust.
Love it.
So I think it's if all that makes sense.
Yeah, totally, totally. What about sticking with the mental game? Are there other important lessons that we haven't hit on that you like to instill in the goalies?
I always tell goalies and coaches to never use the word don't. Um,
Yeah.
and so just in how we approach things, even as coaches, parents, how we teach the game. And I always challenge them to listen to how many times coaches say the word don't. And so in their mind, if you're correcting something or they're working on something, and let's say that their hand is too high, we go, hey, don't put your hand so high. Well, now all they're thinking about is not putting my hand so high. Just the same way that you go, hey, don't think of pink elephants. Don't think of pink elephants. Don't think
Right.
of pink elephants. Right. Well, that's all I think about.
Right.
And so if I can reframe my words and the language to go, hey, this is what I want you to do. I want you to do this. Well, just like don't slide low to high, right? We always tell that from coaches. We don't slide low to high. Okay. Well, does that mean that I never leave the low girl? No, eventually you're going to have to go to that person, right? So if I just say, hey, we slide when the ball gets to the 10. But if I can just simplify my words to avoid using the word don't, and we just phrase it in the way of what we want to do, I want to move to the ball. Okay, move to the ball.
Yeah.
Don't step here. Don't step forward. Don't do this. Don't do that. So that's just kind of one area I think that is really important in just the words that we use as coaches and the words that goalies use in their mind. Because there's a lot of things that happen in goalies' minds that are not beneficial. So from the mental game is they have to understand what those words and what those phrases are, what they actually think. And then the words that they use with their teammates, what does that do? And being able to express those things to your coaches or your teammates. So if a coach is constantly saying don't, you have to then, I use it in terms of you have to figure out almost a translation where they're speaking a different language. So if they say don't do this, you have to translate that into, okay, that means that they want me to do this. And
Right.
now you just reframe it so that it becomes positive of what you want me to do instead of dwelling on the negative.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I read somewhere, or I don't know, someone told me in a podcast somewhere that like the human brain actually doesn't hear that word "don't," right? And so, when you say "don't do this," then all I hear is this, and that's what gets stuck in my mind.
Well, if you're a parent, right? So if you say, I
Yeah,
don't know if you have brothers or sisters, but if you go, hey, don't talk back. Oh,
right.
okay, yeah, that'll work. Don't fight with your brother.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay. Don't fight with your sister. Okay. It just becomes this thing where I want to do it anyway, just out of spite. Just go.
yeah,
You're not going to tell me what to do.
right. Well, my daughter's 8 months, so we haven't gotten to that yet.
Gotcha.
We just got the goo goos and the gagas. So
Yeah, yeah. So don't touch the hot stove, right?
yeah, right. There you go.
If you touch the hot stove, you're gonna get burned.
It's kind of like I post a lot of videos on my Instagram, and there's a lot of goalie coaches like who kind of do the same. And like a lot of the times, like they would break down goals against, right? And be like, don't do this, don't do this, like don't do this. And I was always like, well, what should we do then? Like, show me what I should do. And so the last couple of seasons I've hired videographers and just like they go out to the games and they just put the camera right on the goalie for the entire game. And I just capture some really awesome, like, here's what you should do moments, right? And it's for the goalie nerds, it's awesome. Like for other lacrosse people, like that just looks like a stick high save. That's so easy. But it's like hands drive to the ball, back foot drive, like body gets behind it, stays square, like all the elements of a perfect save. And I find that to be such a more impactful learning tool when you show them what to do, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, that's the question too with goalies is do they have their positive highlight reel that they look just to
Oh,
be able to say, hey, this is how I know I can make saves. Whether
right.
that positive highlight reel is in their head, but the other part from breaking down film is if I make a great save and I'm not doing anything right, right? Where
Right.
I completely stepped the wrong way and I made that save. Or let's say that I went over to make a save that was low and I should have went under because that's the way you're supposed to. Right. So then they start looking at it going, oh, I stepped the wrong way. Instead of going, that was really great body awareness that I was able to step the wrong way and my hands were fast enough to make that save.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't look at that celebration of how great that was. They go, oh, I need to go under on that. I was like, no, that was a great save. You went over and made the save. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I'm supposed to go under on those saves. Why?
Right.
Why?
Well, that's
So,
what
but
I've learned.
again,
That's what
that
I've
having that
learned.
cause
That's what I've learned from watching these like high def saves, frame by frame, super slow motion. It's like the perfect save almost doesn't exist. You see these like elite goalies, right? Liam Entenmann dominating in the pros now, and like watch one of his slow motion saves, and you could still pick out something of like, oh, like he kind of turned his shoulders a little bit. Oh, his hands dropped and then went. You can always pick out something to get better. So if you as a goalie are hyper focused on that, like you're really not focusing on the right things.
right. We're doing something in now. I learn every summer and constantly like to read books. I never read books growing up, but I've been reading lots and lots of books on just how our brain works, how we learn, a lot of different things. So sometimes in our warm-ups with goalies and different lessons, I'll have them start their ready position completely wrong.
Oh,
Wrong.
yeah, right.
And so they'll start their position. If they're a righty, they'll start their hands on the other side of their body and they have to make saves.
Yeah,
And then I'll have them with their hands at their waist and they have to make saves. And then I'll have them at their hands on and offside here and then they
I
have
like
to
it.
make saves.
Yeah, I
And
like it.
so when they practice doing that, they have to recruit their muscles to go make a save. And now they become more aware of how their body needs to move if they drop their hands. And the
Right.
other premise behind it is I'll ask a goalie, do you ever start making a save with your stick on the other side of your body? And they go, no, never. So what if they fake over there? Do your hands go over here? Well, yeah. Well, if your hands go over here, right? And they faked you, now what do you have to do to make a save? You have to
Yeah.
go from here to figure out how to get to a save.
Oh, I like
And
it.
so
Yeah, yeah.
we will just start their normal ready position, all sorts of hands over here, hands all over the place. And the interesting part is that when you do that as a warm up, because it is so abnormal to what you're used to being your ready position, is after you do that and you go back to being your normal ready, their body will figure out what it likes to do the best as a ready position because they just became so uncomfortable doing all sorts of different ready positions that now when you go, okay, we're just going to play normal now, they'll make little fine adjustments on their own without me saying anything because they want to get to what's the best feeling to be ready to make a save, not perfect ready position, if all that makes sense.
Oh, it makes 100% sense. Yeah. I hope people are still listening at this point of the podcast. We just dropped some fire right there at the end. Yeah, right. There's so often you do get faked out and you end up in this weird position. And can you adjust to another position from there? And then, to your other point of like, if I set up here and I got to come back, I now get more comfortable in getting into that ready position quicker. Um, and just to make normal saves.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Arvak, well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your wisdom. Tons of great tips in there. It was a pleasure getting to know you. Folks want to learn a little bit more about you. Where should I send them?
I don't do social media, so
All good.
I don't know where to find me.
Yeah, all right. Try and track them down. You can email me,
Anne Arundel
Damon at
County.
Lax. Yeah, Damon at Lax Goalie Rat. Awesome, Arvak. Well, have a great day. And if you had to leave the goalies out there with one final piece of advice, what would that be?
Have fun, be a great teammate.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.